Hey guys, we're back for our second edition of Off the Clock with Your Attorneys with Herman Wells. And since we're off the clock, we don't need to be in the office. So we are at Palm Harbor House of Beer. If you guys have never been here, it's a hidden gem up here in North County. If you're drinking beer in North County, Pinellas, and you're not drinking beer here, you're missing something. 50 taps, really rare stuff. AJ's had the place since I think about 2010. So he's been here for a long time, always has a great beer selection, always real accommodating. They got pool tables, dartboards, and it's 50 taps and then a bunch of cans too that are hard to find stuff too. Come up here. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to be out of the office and find these little hidden gems and small businesses, because at our heart, even though we're a law firm, that's what Herman Wells is. It's a small business, and we want to support small businesses. So that's what we're going to do. If you guys have any ideas of small businesses or hidden gems that you know in your area that you want us to maybe stop by, you can put a comment below or send us an email at info@hermanwells.com, and we'll be happy to check it out. Can't guarantee we can make every place, but we're going to make an effort. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some really basics about insurance law, dealing with property insurance and homeowners insurance. Of course, as always, we have Warren Duffy,
Hello.
who's an attorney at Herman Wells, and we have Keith Saul, who's an attorney at Herman Wells. After we talk about insurance law, we're going to talk about football, which we all like to talk about. So it's going to be pretty fun. Stick with us. So we're going to start. Now, I do property law, but Warren and Keith have been doing it for much longer than me. So a lot of my questions are going to be for them to answer, because they're the ones that really have that backbone of experience and can break it down to you guys more succinctly. I'm going to talk about it very legally, and probably you're not going to understand most of it because that's how I know it, but they've been dealing with clients for 7 years, 5 years on this stuff, and they really know how to speak it. So I'm going to ask them a lot of questions. I'm going to start off with a basic question that I get, and either of you can answer, is people say, do you do property insurance or do you do homeowners insurance? Is there a difference? Is there a distinction?
Great question. Yeah, I think property insurance is a kind of a broader label that you can put over lots of different types of insurance that covers real property, physical property, buildings, and land. And homeowners insurance is what you get for your house.
That's how I consider it. Your homeowner's insurance is going to be for the dwelling itself, the residence, whereas the property insurance is going to cover other structures on your land, such as sheds or detached carports, as well as other items, whether that be from your landscaping in certain instances or fences that are attached to your property. That property insurance can cover much more than just the dwelling itself on the property.
That brings me to a question, because we're talking about small businesses. People normally say, Billy, don't worry about it. I have business insurance. Does business insurance cover damage to these small businesses, their interior, if they have a leak, a storm, anything like that? So is business insurance property insurance?
Maybe.
Yeah, it depends on the policy, and that's why it's really necessary to dig into your policy and know exactly what it's covering. It can sometimes be for the building envelope but a lot of times, when especially small businesses, they are not owning the building itself, right? They're coming in, they're renting a property, and then it's really the interior items within that, such as in this situation, we've got pool tables, we've got a tap system, we've got chairs, tables. Those are going to really be the items of physical property that are covered, and a lot of times in addition to that, you're going to have your income protected, so that if something interrupts the flow of income, such as a fire to the building or a water loss to the building, that your business income is going to be protected. Do you have anything additional, Warren, that is sometimes found in these insurance policies that come to mind?
That business income is one of the most important ones that businesses can put on their insurance, because it covers you while you're not open. Yeah, your building's not able to be used because it was damaged by a loss, but you still have bills to pay, you still have suppliers you've got to pay, and so it's real important to get that business interruption portion on most insurance, as well as your inventory, because if you lose what you're going to be selling, you sell a product, you've now got to restock that as well. So it's really important when you're looking at business policies that you sit with somebody and figure out, either a licensed insurance agent or attorney, what you need covered to make sure that policy has been customized to cover that.
And if there's a business owner or property owner out there that is hearing something from their insurance agent and really wants a second opinion, can they reach out to one of you guys and have you guys look at the policy and let you know what's covered and what's not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we do all the time, and are more than willing to do it. It's not going to cost you anything. You pick up the phone, call us, say, hey, I've got a question on my policy. Can you look it over for us? And we're going to be able to do that. We're very familiar with these policies and can give you some guidance on it.
And what I do want to add here is when we say you have a concern of something that was told to you by your insurance agent, we're not saying that your insurance agent is trying to swindle you, but there is a very fine, delicate line between what is actually written and how the law interprets it. So your insurance agent may be selling you everything that he or she thinks that you need. However, the policy may have these embedded exclusions or other things that the agent really doesn't know about because the insurance company is not telling them the policies contain this. You don't know how many times I have insurance agent called me that says, I sold this policy. It was clear to me that it's covering this. Now they're saying it's not. Bill, can you look at it and tell me? And a lot of times these insurance agents are hoodwinked by the same companies that they sell.
Oh, and how many times, Warren, have we seen a case in which they're arguing about the definition of a word within one of these policies, right?
Yep.
And they're going to Merriam-Webster's dictionary and parsing, yeah, right? Not only is sometimes the interpretation certainly left up to the courts, can be challenging even for an insurance agent that practices it to be up to speed on all the developments within the law and how these policies are interpreted by courts. So that's another problem sometimes.
Awesome. I live by a motto that no matter what everybody tells you, no matter what the commercials say, you literally get what you pay for when it comes to certain things in life. One of those, I believe, is your insurance policy. Meaning, if you go to your insurance agent and say, I want the cheapest homeowner's insurance policy, you're literally going to get exactly what you pay for. Do you agree with that?
To a degree, yes. I think it gets a little bit more intricate, though, if we start to talk about force-placed policies and what force-placed policies are, right? Because force-placed policies...
Somebody else's insurance?
Yeah, somebody else's insurance that you're paying for, and that somebody else, oh, by the way, is your mortgage company. And not only are those policies super expensive, but they provide absolutely the bare minimal coverage, right? And so that happens to somebody essentially when they're unable to obtain private insurance in the market. And so then the mortgage company steps in and they insure the property, but turn around and charge you through that contract, your mortgage contract, for that coverage. That's why I just wanted to carve out that sort of exclusion.
That's
right?
awesome, because that did, you know what? This is why we have these conversations, folks, because that didn't even come to mind to me when I was writing these questions. And when he said, I'm like, which pains me because I've known him for 15 years, and for me to say Keith is right, it just right here, let a piece of me died. But besides that,
I think what you were talking about, though,
thank you, Warren.
telling your agent,
pick me up
hey,
here.
I don't want to pay for stuff, and so you get this policy. It doesn't cover things like hurricanes, or doesn't cover things like water damage. And yeah, it's less expensive, but we live in Florida, and if you have damage, it's going to be from a hurricane or water damage.
It's a great point. The limited coverages for water damage. So we're seeing a lot of these policies in which they say they only cover up to $10,000 for water damage, any water damage whatsoever in the property, and it caps the homeowner at that, even if their home essentially, from a broken pipe gets flooded, you've got cabinets, flooring to replace, all of that stuff. One's going to find out very quickly it's going to be well in excess of $10,000. Oh, that's a great point.
And we say $10,000 because that's what, in these limited water policy claims, that's the amount I've seen most often, is about that $10,000 mark. So let's talk about some of the things that can raise or lower your rate in your insurance plan, but are really important that you need to make hard considerations. First of all, is your non-hurricane deductible. Can you explain the difference between a hurricane deductible and a non-hurricane deductible?
Yeah, sure. Just a loss that occurs during a hurricane versus one that occurs from another one of our numerous thunderstorms or severe storms that we get here in Florida.
So the policies will have a different level of deductible for each of these things?
Correct, yeah. Your hurricane deductible is going to be much higher.
Yep. And now the hurricane deductible is going to be based off of once a named storm is within what's called the box here in Florida. And they draw a box around the state of Florida, and once a named storm comes anywhere inside that box. So if you're in Pensacola, it comes in the box down Miami, you are now under hurricane deductible. Whether or not you have a loss during that storm or from that storm, that's the deductible that's going to apply because that's what's going on in the world.
Even if the storm hits Miami, but you just get a typical Florida thunderstorm that knocks a pine tree onto your house, they're going to treat it with a higher hurricane deductible because a hurricane was somewhere in this nebulous box.
Yep, that's what you'll see.
Wow. All right, so let's also talk about, and I know these are really technical issues, but I want you guys to give them the Reader Digest version, especially explain it to them like you explained it to me when I first came aboard here.
We don't have time for that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so let's get out the dunce cap and the crayons like you guys did for me. No, what I'm saying is that in some policies, they're limited to actual cash value replacement, and some they're limited to replacement value. Can you explain why somebody that says, oh, I got this great deal on this insurance policy, but it's actual cash value only, not replacement value, why that's bad?
So an actual cash value policy pays you the value of your property that was damaged minus the depreciation. And the easiest way to think about this is a car accident. If I get rear-ended in my car, I do not get what I owe in my loan. I don't get what I think my car is worth. I get what the insurance company says, this is the value of your car because it's not worth as much as when you bought it. So that's how actual cash value works in a home policy.
Can I stop you?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm a homeowner, and I say I get how you're going to ascertain the fair market value of my car, right?
Yep.
You're going to go to Kelley Blue Book or one of those like sources, right?
Yep.
How are you valuing my ceiling or my walls?
So that is valued based on the adjuster. And there may be a formula that's used, but I don't know what it is. Because I've seen depreciation be anywhere from 60% to 20%, depending on how old something is. So if your house is a 1960 build and you need to put new floors in and they're from 1960, your insurance company is going to tell you those are 60-year-old floors. Someone check my math on that.
Yeah.
But they're going to depreciate that based on the fact that it's been there for that long. And that becomes a big issue because we're now arguing over how much money they should be taking away from you. Whereas replacement cost, oh, I can't even say it. Keith, you go.
Replacement costs.
Thank you. You take this one while I stop stuttering.
The replacement cost is essentially what it's going to take to actually repair that damaged item. So they're not only going to pay you for the water-stained ceiling or the damaged drywall, they're going to have to take into account essentially what it's going to cost to cut that portion out, put in some new drywall, and then paint it, repair it, and put the property back to its pre-loss condition. And so that's going to be the difference between the actual cash value versus the replacement cost.
So in layman terms, in your car analogy, Warren, you have a house, you've had a roof on that house for 16 years or whatever. It's still a great roof.
Yep.
Still's got a lot of life left in it. Hurricane comes through or something comes through, damages the roof, something falls on it. The insurance company is going to say, ooh, I know that roof is $40,000, but that roof only had about 3 usable years left in it. So therefore, here's $9,000, have fun.
Yep, that's a pretty drastic amount of depreciation. We hope insurance companies wouldn't apply that much. But yeah, that's what you're looking at. It's going to cost you this much to fix the roof. You're not gonna get it.
Keith tends to disagree with that being drastic because it looks like he's seen it.
You've seen some pretty extreme depreciation estimates, right, out there, and there's no real hard and fast guidelines, at least within our case law,
Correct.
that says you can't depreciate in that manner or in that light. And then really, I think it comes back to then getting a good advocate on your side, right? Somebody
Absolutely.
that you're going to want to explain this process to a jury
Yep.
and educate them on that and be able to show how extreme depreciation was, because a lot of us do have 15, 16-year-old roofs, and guess what? They're working great.
Yep.
We don't have leaks. We expect for them to continue on. That the value of my roof as we sit here, to me, is very close to what I paid for it.
Yep.
It's working as it worked in year one.
Right.
It's not working 70% of the way or something like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And the other thing that I've run into where people save money is these insurance policies will have a list of everything that they cover. We'll cover coverages and your fencing and all this. Except if there's a hurricane, then we don't cover anything but the main house and anything that falls under the roof. And I've seen a lot of people. I have a client now who built a brand new house, and literally 3 or 4 months before the last hurricane rolled through, and she bought a policy that she didn't understand had a hurricane exemption for her outside structures, and her beautiful 2-story birdcage, brand new, got blown down, and it ripped up all her pavers and rolled into her fence, and then the storm blew down her fence. And now she's looking at $50,000 to replace birdcage, screen, pavers, and fence that wasn't covered. And she's telling me now, if I would have known this, it was worth that extra $100 a month or whatever.
Right.
Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
There's lots of exclusions within a policy. It depends on what your policy actually covers and what it doesn't. There's lots of things on that coverage checklist that you're talking about, which is that graph that has little checks that say yes, that this is covered. But it just tells you that it provides coverage for it, not what the exclusions or the limitations are. Like that hurricane aspect of things. Screened enclosures might be covered under the policy for a normal wind event, but if it's her named stormed, there's no coverage for it. You have to buy additional coverage to put on, and you have to have an agent that tells you that this is how this works, and then give you pricing for it as well.
So what question, when they sit down with their agent, and I know when we talk about these things, it seems like we're bad-mouthing agents. We're not.
No.
I think agents are awesome. They do a great job, but agents they don't have a crystal ball. They will answer the questions that you ask them. If they go, is my screen enclosure covered? They'll say yes. You didn't ask them, what are my hurricane exclusions? Because that's a different question. So a lot of it is, these agents know the answers. You have to ask the right questions. The other thing is, now that people are buying more and more of this insurance online, there's nobody to answer those questions. What do you think is the best way a person should communicate with their agent to make sure that all these things that we're talking about are covered?
I think one of the good things is to really review the paperwork along with your agent and explaining to your agent what you're looking for, what you need coverage for, and for any sort of amounts, making sure that you are aware of the amount of coverage that you need as well. But really, it takes a lot of dialogue. You're going to have to take up some of their time, right? So you need to find an insurance agent that's willing to give you time so you can explain what you need coverage for, and then discuss any sort of conclusions that may come up that you're not necessarily in agreement with, because again, you want to find the policy that's going to fit you, not the price necessarily that fits you. Price is good, but that's not the end all be all, because we've done a 360 back to what you said earlier about getting what you paid for. And now's not the time to necessarily cut those corners, especially not in Florida.
Now, there is another little portion that people tend to exclude out of their coverages to save them some money. It's something called law and ordinance coverage. And in our first podcast where we're talking with Josh Keller, Josh explained that. But for those that haven't watched that yet, and we're hoping that you'd go back and watch it, what is law and ordinance coverage?
So it's additional coverage that is usually applied to a policy at a percentage of your overall coverage at your building code. It's usually 10 or 25%, maybe 50. And it covers you if you have to rebuild to a higher building code, because your insurance policy puts you back the way you were. But if your house is from 1965 and it's 2023, the building codes have changed. And your contractor can't come out and put your roof on like it's 1963. They got to put it on like it's 2023, and they got to meet all those codes. They got to use enough nails. They got to use clips or straps. There has to be some other aspect that goes into bringing it up to code. Now that's in addition to how it was before. So they're not putting it back like it was. They're adding to it, but they have to. And so that's why that coverage is important, because it brings your house up to code. Otherwise, you're coming out of pocket for those costs, which you're going to incur because no contractor is building something below code.
Two quick examples, and I think illustrate it the best, are most of us, I know my house, and Keith, probably your house too from when it was built, our front doors open in, meaning you welcome into our house. Most homes' doors do that. However, Florida has adopted the Miami-Dade building codes after Hurricane Andrew, that Miami-Dade put in after Hurricane Andrew, that the exterior doors open out to stop them from blowing in, because that's what destroyed a lot of the houses down in Miami-Dade. The doors failed, blew in, and then the pressure popped in the wind, popped the roofs off and destroyed these houses. Just as an example, something happens to your house, they're going to come, the insurance company is going to come and pay for your doors to be put in, just like they were going back into your house. the city's going to say those doors need to be faced going outside, which is an additional cost because they have to rehinge them and rekey them and change the whole foundation, but they're not going to pay for that, correct?
Correct.
And the other thing to do is if you live in certain areas, if a hurricane comes in and destroys your house and you don't have law and ordinance, they'll turn around and say, great, but you're exempt. You can't have any living space on the first floor now. So now your house has to be built on stilts. And the insurance company is going to say, to replace your house, a single-story dwelling, here's that money. It's going to be 3 times as much to put it on stilts and run the plumbing and the electricity. Didn't have coverage. Have fun.
We've seen it.
Yep.
How about constructive total losses? Did we get into that? Where essentially the estimate to rebuild your home is more than half of the appraised value. And in those instances, especially with floodplain elevation, like you said, they would have to raise the home, which is going to be, let's say your home costs $200,000, you're going to pay what, $300,000?
I don't even know anymore, but
raise it if possible, right? It's
Right.
going to be extremely expensive, and these are just like hypothetical figures. But to demonstrate, let's say you've got a legitimate estimate for $200,000, and it's going to be $101,000. The county's not going to let you repair. They're going to come in and say, oh, it's over half of that appraised value, and therefore, in order for you to repair, you're going to have to raise this home, and you're going to have to meet the floodplain elevation that exists now.
Yep.
And in those instances, fortunately, Florida has what's called a constructive total loss, in which you will be able to get policy limits on the total amount of your policy because the law does recognize this problem exists. But even then, sometimes that may not be enough, which we need to then, as homeowners, be readdressing every year. What is the insured value of my property? And do I need to go back to my insurance agent and say, hey, agent, I need something that fits the increase of the insured value.
Yep, the market, the rebuild cost.
Right, I'm willing to pay more for that. Or do you take the risk? That's something we need to explore.
And that goes right into my next point that I had on my list, is that the replacement value. I know in my own insurance, when I renewed last year, I looked at the replacement value of my house, and I called up my agent and said, you can't build my house for this anymore. I'd been with the same insurance company for 5 or 6, and I'm looking at it saying, I can't build my house for this amount of money.
And the property values in the last, 2-3 years here in Florida?
Yeah. The cost of rebuild, anything has gone up, and you should probably reassess to make sure you've got enough coverage for it at this point, because if you haven't looked at your policy in 6 or 7 years, you may be drastically underinsured.
Oh, and let's say your home catches on fire, or you have something catastrophic happen. And like you said, you haven't looked at that policy in 10, 15 years. The amount your insurance company is going to pay out versus the amount you need to rebuild that property is going to be drastically different.
And I don't want people to think that, I don't want to do that because then I'm tipping off the government about house worth or what. The tax appraisers, they know what your house is worth. They tax you on that.
Right.
That and what is in your insurance policy are not tied together in any way. And so you're already paying the taxes on it, and so you better get the worth out of it.
The property appraiser's doing their job every year, right? They're moving it up, but the problem is the insurance company is not moving up the insured value of your policy every year. So that's the problem. We got one of these moving up and the other staying stagnant.
And the other thing, you said something before about other covered properties. And Warren, I want you to address this because I talked to you about a couple claims that I had where the fence went right up against the house, but wasn't physically attached, so it was deemed something else, or they had an in-law suite in the back, or they had a beautiful gazebo or shed or something like that, and to find out that it wasn't covered in their policy at all. What should people look for when they have these other structures? And can you give some examples of other structures? Because I don't think people realize what they are.
One other structures is anything that's not physically attached to your main dwelling building, that in-law apartment or in-law she shed or whatever they're called these days. If that's back there, you need to make sure that you've got enough to rebuild it, because that other coverage is coverage B, is usually, I think, 10% of your coverage A. So you're insured for $200,000 for your own home. You have $20,000 in other structures. That may not be enough to cover. Now, if you don't have anything else on your property, you just have a yard, then you might not want that coverage. You might be able to reduce that a good bit, and that's where you can save some money. But if your fence is not touching your house, it's another structure. Fencing is not as inexpensive as people think it is. So you want to know what else you have that's not touching it and what it's going to cost to replace it so you can adequately insure yourself. Now, other structures also include things when you have multiple buildings on your property, because one of those is going to be your main, and other structures on that property are going to be other structures. If you have, say, a shed, and then you also have a reptile enclosure and a bird sanctuary section, and then you also have a barn with all your tractor equipment in it and those supplies, those are all other structures covered under that coverage B. So you could have multiples on your property. And this is a situation that we've run into after Hurricane Ian claim, where there are like 15 or 16 other structures on this property. So you need to know what you got and customize your insurance accordingly to make sure that you've got the coverage for it.
Now, what happens if you have a chicken coop or a shed, and even in a bad Florida summer storm, but let's say one of these named storms, that gets picked up and thrown into the main structure, knocks down your screening, smashes windows, damages the roof in the house. How does the insurance company look at that when there's an uncovered entity that damages the covered entity?
It should still be covered because at that point it's wind-borne debris, right? And wind is the cause of loss in that sort of situation. And I think you'd be protected in that situation, provided your insurance company is interpreting the policy correctly, which is always the million-dollar question.
That could be wear and tear too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say that because I want people to realize that we're not talking about coverage for damage from these structures. We're talking about damage to these structures itself. Now, if your fence isn't physically attached to your home, Warren said it, these fences that are now being required by HOAs and the cities, it's no longer are the days that you can just throw up a chain link fence. In most neighborhoods, I know in Pinellas County, there's very few of the neighborhoods that just allow you to just do a typical fence. They have to be the wooden slat fence, the vinyl fencing, the PVC fencing, and those are outrageously expensive right now. So you really have to look into that to say, it's just my fence. Yeah, if you have, I don't know, 2 or 3 sections of fence that are yours, that close off something, that's fine. But if it's your fence, meaning that you own the fence and it covers your property, that's about almost as expensive as blowing over a large custom unattached garage, those fencings, if you really look at it.
Yeah, they can be.
Yeah.
Depending on the material, like you said.
Tens of thousands of dollars just for a normal thing. If you have a lot of property, just to give an example, I replaced 5 things with my brother-in-law. At his house, I got blown down by a storm. And at Home Depot, on sale, those 5 fence sections cost him $560.
Yep.
And we did the work. Right. And we didn't replace the posts.
Right.
So once you start going into looking at that, 4x4s get blown down. It gets mangled. You got to replace a lot of it, and you don't have the ability to do it. That's just not replacing a fence. People need to look into their coverages, because that's the thing that I see a lot, and probably you guys here too, is my fence isn't covered. How am I going to pay this $10,000, $15,000 bill to replace it? Right. It's that much on some of these properties, and there's no coverage for it. So I just wanted to point that out, because sometimes people go, it's just a fence. But let's move to another question I have. Pools, above ground, which you don't see many in Florida, and in-ground pools. How does coverage work with those things?
Pools are weird. Every case is different. I don't have a bright line rule with pools or kind of analysis with pools. You got to look at each one to see what happened.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say a lot of policies do find ways, though, to exclude them.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times we see popped pools, right?
Yep.
Popped pools are a problem.
Yes, they are.
And a lot of
So
times,
what's a popped pool?
Warren?
Your pool has no water in it, and the water is very heavy when it's in the pool, and that is what helps keep it in the ground. So when the water's out of the pool, it evaporated, who knows what happened, the pool came out of the ground. So now your pool is above ground, sitting on top, and it shouldn't be.
And
Okay.
a lot of times you'll see policies have language that excludes that type of damage. Correct, and that can be problematic.
And it's also problematic too because let's say that you do have a damage to your pool from a storm, an event, catastrophic collapse, shifting, or whatever, and you're fighting with your insurance company, and your pool is now green and festering. The city and the county doesn't care that you're fighting with your insurance company. They have ways to find this out, either by complaints of neighbors or however they do it, and you'll start getting fined on those, won't you?
Yep.
And there's no, my insurance company's fighting me on this. There's no defense like that.
No.
Okay. And there's even no defense to that. Even if you blue tarp your roof, there's some cities and municipalities that'll say, okay, it's now been this long, you got to fix your roof. We don't care if the insurance company's paying for it or not.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about if there is a problem. And we briefly talked about this last time, but I want to, every time we talk about insurance, property insurance, I want to talk about what you need to do if you see there's a problem or you think there's a problem, so people hear it multiple times. There's a storm or there's not a storm. Keith, you walk in and you see a water spot on your ceiling or a water spot on the wall or water on your floor. What do you do?
Call my insurance company. First thing I'm doing, calling my insurance company saying, I see damage. I see damage right now. And then my second question is, can I hire a mitigation company, or will you provide a mitigation company? Because I need somebody up on that roof, tarping that roof for me to make it watertight and watertight, prevent it from further leaking. So I think that's the first thing I do, and that's my first question.
Now, why do you want to ask that question? Can I hire a water mitigation company, or do you want to provide? Why is that important?
Lots of reasons, right?
All right. Educate us.
All right. One of the first things we want to take note of is what our limits are. We go back to limits and we look at those reasonable measures to protect the property, and a lot of times you'll have a limit of $3,000 or $5,000, and maybe you get it $5,000, but most of the time what we'll see is $3,000 or $3,500 of coverage. The problem is mitigation can be much more expensive than this. It can, believe it or not, cost you $5,000, $6,000 to have a tarp put on your roof. And a lot of homeowners are shocked by this cost. And so what happens is, if I hire the mitigation company, then I really need to be in charge of setting prices and having them make sure they stay within a certain range and tell me if it's going above and beyond, and I need to assume that anything above and beyond that dollar amount is going to come out of my pockets because we've reached the limits. And so that's an important thing to know if you're hiring your own company.
And those limits are located in your policy.
They are.
So you got to read it.
Now, yes, and sometimes you need to dig.
Yeah, so there's usually a section giving you that limit and telling you that you have to get prior approval if you're going to do anything in the first few days.
Yes.
And that's the critical time that you need to be doing things, remember. So that's that prior approval you want to reach out for. Like he said, call your insurance company.
So, and a great point, sorry
Go
to interrupt, Bill. You can sometimes exceed these limits too. There are avenues to get above them, but you have to read your policy, because your policy will say you must ask for it in writing within 48 hours or have some time period like that. And so you need to strictly comply with that, because what will happen is a lot of times in these policies you get a chance to request for additional money.
To piggyback on what Warren was talking about in our last podcast, you are calling the insurance company with one hand and you have your phone out with your other hand, taking video and as many pictures as you can, right, Keith?
Yes.
Document.
That is absolutely what you want to do right after you get off the phone with the insurance company, is make sure that you are documenting the damage and that you've got some hard and fast record or evidence, however you want to think of it, of what damage you are observing and what's been caused by the storm. And a lot of times this damage, it can change quickly. And what I mean by that is, you start to see the water dripping down on your ceiling, right? It just looks like a damp spot on your ceiling. Within a matter of weeks, it can turn brown. And when it turns brown, one of the things that we sometimes find with adjusters is they immediately suspect that because it's discolored, that it has been there for a long period of time. But we living in Florida know that can happen very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And so if I've got a video showing that spot is damp, dripping, not discolored, and 2 weeks later when that adjuster gets there to inspect, and he says, "You sure that's not been there a longer time?" I've got that evidence. I've got that video to say, this was 2 weeks ago. And you can see the date on the iPhone video or whatever. So, yes.
Now, there was something that also that our last guest, Josh Keller of ADR, was talking about, is that if it's a roof leak or water all over your floor, yes, get the insurance company involved. But if it's like a little spot on your wall, take your pictures and do all that, but it may behoove you to get a plumber to come in, because it just may be a pinhole leak in one of your pipes that he comes, he fixes, replace, and you're not making a claim against your insurance company.
Great point. Do you want to talk about multiple claims, what that can cause, your deductible, how that interplays with that decision?
So it's a double-edged sword here in Florida. Is you don't want to report too many claims, because if you do, you're not going to get homeowners insurance, or it's going to be really expensive. For water losses, if you have more than one, most insurance companies won't write you. If your house has had more than one, you may not be able to get insurance. So you buy a house and the prior owner had a water loss, they may not want to insure you anymore. So you have to be a little bit careful on when you're filing the claim.
And if it's a $500 repair,
Yep.
your deductible's $1,000. What sense does that make filing
Absolutely.
a claim?
But you also got to balance that with, if you find 3 weeks later after you made that repair, that damage was a lot more widespread. Maybe that leak wasn't just in that one spot, or maybe it's been leaking for a little bit, or it got down underneath something, and now your loss is a lot more expensive. You have destroyed the evidence that showed what happened, and you're going to get denied because you made repairs before the insurance company could see it. So you got to balance those two when you're looking at it, and it's always important to talk to a professional. So have a plumber look at it, have a carpenter, have someone who specializes in floors look at things and figure out what's going on, what are we going to need. But you've already documented it, you've timestamped that, and now you can figure out if you're filing the claim wrong.
So you should be okay that if you just see a little size of a silver dollar spot on your wall in your bathroom or in a bedroom on the wall that shares one with a bathroom, we all normally see those. We've all had houses a long time and probably know that there's a little pinhole somewhere in a pipe, and you take a picture of it, you call the plumber, and the plumber comes out and says, "Oh no, it's a bigger problem." You should be asking your plumber right there to take pictures, to not destroy the wall board, and then you're on the phone as soon as you can, and then you have an argument, I would believe, to the insurance companies. I reported it once I reasonably knew the extent of it.
Yes, absolutely. So when damage is hidden, behind walls, that typically is only, it's not going to be discovered until it's manifested either on a wall or on a floor or something like that. And yes, most policies very well lay out what happens in that case, and yes, it should be covered. The other thing I wanted to touch on when Warren was talking about, let's say you've got a leak going on, you call out a plumber, it's not a big deal, right? But it's happened and it harmed this area. You go through with repairs, save your repair documents. Please save your repair documents, because if you ever have a loss in the future, they are going to ask, have you ever had a loss? Have you ever had a leak before? And it will really help to be able to show that, yes, I had one, here was the damage, here was the repair done, the property was fixed and normal when this new loss happened, so that you don't see an adjuster come to your property and try to tie this new loss into that prior damage that you had. And so keeping your repair documents is extremely important for that purpose.
And I tell everybody, and I'm going to look right at the camera and say, there's no reason why you're not keeping these things. Gone are the days where you had to have a file cabinet, and when the storm comes, you got to take all this big file cabinet worth of stuff with you. Nowadays, you can get a Gmail account for free. I don't know one person that's not an Amazon Prime member. Amazon, Google, all these, Apple, if you have an iPhone, you have free storage, free data storage. And it is a lot. You really have to try hard to go over it to the point that some of them are offering terabytes worth of storage for free. It's unfathomable how much that is, which means that you have no reason to take those pictures, save them, take a picture of the repair bill, either take a picture of it or scan it. Most iPhones now and Android phones, you hit a button and it actually scans it for you, and then you save it in a file on the cloud in your Gmail, in your Drive, in your Google, whatever Microsoft's is, I can't remember what they call it, the Microsoft OneDrive. Those are all, we all have those, and they're free. Save it there, because you have to realize is that once you have a catastrophic event, a tree falls through your house is damaged by a hurricane, and you run out and water is pouring in and you're evacuated, are you really going to be able to go through and find that one file folder stuffed in the bottom of your desk for repair that you had 3 years ago? You're never going to find it. But the insurance company is going to use that to say, it was the same wall, not all that damage is ours. Correct?
Yeah, they
Same
certainly
wall,
could.
same room, same house.
Yeah, same house, same zip code.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we say that facetiously because we find that insurance companies will tend to try to extrapolate one little thing. That's simply a leak in a pipe that sprayed on your wall that the plumber came out and fixed, and you patched the drywall with, you cut a little drywall out and patched it yourself from Home Depot for $20. And then you have water running down that same wall from a roof leak. We've had insurance companies go, that was all caused by that pinhole leak that you had 5 years ago. And how do you prove that it wasn't? Pictures. Okay. So I always ask this. I know you're now a property insurance attorney here for the firm, but before you did family law and you were a public defender. And Warren and I asked this of everybody on there, what was the weirdest case? Now, I always have to preface this way, guys, because of our society, I have to give a disclaimer. It's horrible when somebody loses their home. It's horrible when somebody goes to jail. It's horrible when somebody's injured in a car accident. There are some cases where the facts are so weird that you take the case boggled on how the 2x4 went through the neighbor's tree and broke a window. Those are the type of things that we're talking about, are really interesting fact patterns. We were talking to Josh Keller, who said that his weirdest one was they had to prove that a hailstone the size of a baseball or softball went through a tile roof and cracked tile in the kitchen. That blows, but there was evidence of it. Mm-hmm. But to me, I would never think that a hailstone would go through a roof, the board, the sheet, the tile, and then crack a tile. Right. So we're talking about just weird stuff like that. What's your weirdest?
I'm gonna think of it 2 days from now and say I should have said this, because I've had so many just weird, interesting cases along my career. I've been at this it's going to be year 16, gentlemen. So I feel like a seasoned vet almost at this point. I know there's a lot of attorneys out there that have been doing it longer, but 16, I feel old. And my first 3.5 was, like you mentioned, at the public defender's office. And I certainly could tell you plenty of stories that probably are not. I'm going to try and pick one out that was just unusual for me. Never thought I'd get involved with it. But I once, very early on, I think in year 4 or 5, it was my first year in private practice, I had a situation where it was a dog custody case.
Okay.
Where a former couple was fighting over ownership
Of a dog.
And the way it was resolved was just like you would say when parents split and divvy up time sharing amongst their children. It was very much where the boyfriend would have the dog on Monday, Wednesday, Friday of 1 week, and Tuesday, Thursday of the other, and flip-flop. And yeah, that was quite an interesting scenario that I never thought I'd find myself in.
I gotta tell you, kid, I would think that was weird, except that my wife practiced family law for a long time, and she told me that she had one with a African gray parrot that they were insisting wasn't the right one, so they had to DNA test feathers to see if it was the same one. Now we're going to segue into our football portion. With our football portion, of course, we're going to because we're off the clock, and we've always been off the clock. Now we're talking about football, not law. Best thing with football is beer. We're going to enjoy some good beer here, supplied by Palm Harbor House of Beer. And football is a great segue to what that final part where we're talking about, guys. I tell people all the time, what does your policy say? They go, what does the law say? I'm like, what does a policy say? Because to give you a football analogy, the policy is your rule book. Why is a field goal 3 points and an extra point 1 point? It's the same freaking kick.
Right.
Why is a catch in the NFL you need 2 feet, and in college you need 1 foot in? Simple reason. The rule book says so. When we get these insurance policies, you guys need to get them and read them because that's the rule book. That's what's going to tell you if you win the game or lose the game. It's based on the rules. And the insurance companies have written these policies so the rules are in their favor. And then they are like the NFL who interpret their own rules in really innocuous ways. Again, if you ever have any questions, give us a call, 727-821-3195, 727-821-3195, and one of us will be happy to read your rule book, read that policy, as I said, and answer your questions. Now, we're not going to tell you what coverage is the best or what you should do that way. That's for your insurance professional. But we can tell you what your policies have and what it lacks and what we would like to see in policies, and then you can deal with your insurance professional on that.
Right.
But
We're attorneys, not financial planners.
that's right. Now we are moving to the football section. Now, known Keith for a long time. We went to Bucs games together, tailgated together. We're both Florida State fans. So we're just going to talk about the football and the upcoming football season. Keith, first of all, who are your favorite football teams, pro and college?
Growing up in Central Florida, I'm from Sebring, Florida.
First of all, guys, cheers.
Cheers. I grew up 2 hours from here, the Bay Area. So, of course, I'm a Bucs fan. I've always been a Bucs fan as far back as I can remember. My dad was a Bucs fan when they came into existence, and I was very much raised a Bucs fan, still a Bucs fan to this day. College, I went to Florida State, and you can't go to a better school for football than that. I am a diehard Knoll.
And I, too, am a Bucs fan. Been down here in the Tampa Bay area since I was 2 years old. I also went to Florida State. I'm not wearing a Florida State shirt right now. I'm wearing a Florida A&M shirt because my son plays football for them. And before anybody asks, the question I get all the time, no, he's not a kicker. He's actually an offensive lineman. So in terms of the Bucs, how do you think they're going to do this year?
I think they're going to have a tough season. I think as a Bucs fan, we're in store for a season in which this begins the rebuild. We obviously just had one of the pinnacles of Bucs history and had the greatest quarterback of all time playing for us, and now you lose that quarterback. There's no way to rationally expect your team to outperform what it did the past couple of years. So I really think it's going to be a season in which we have a lot of growing pains and transitioning from having that veteran-laden team that did so well for these past couple of years and moving into a situation where now there are a lot of spots to be filled and a lot of the younger guys that need to step up.
The head coach just announced that Baker Mayfield is going to be the starting quarterback. Yep. To be honest, I thought that everybody thought there was going to be a competition. Not that I don't think you know football, because you do. I just thought it was very unrealistic. You had Kyle Trask, who I know everybody loves because he's from the University of Florida, and I think that I speak just like Keith, even though we're Florida State fans. When those people put on the red and pewter, or back in the day, orange and white, I don't care where they went to school. They're Bucs fans, and I want them to do good. So I want Kyle Trask to do good, just like I wanted Eric Rett to do good and everybody that came before, because I don't want them to be bad and play for the Bucs, because then they're bad for the Bucs. Okay.
Right.
I always thought that Kyle Trask was going to have a tough time because he never could break, or the second round pick, he never could break into the starting, not the starting role because Tom Brady was there, but he could never beat out Gabbert. And I know Gabbert was a first round pick, but you saw Gabbert coming in games, and it wasn't like he was some super stud backup that was your old reliable. He didn't really play that whenever he came in, yet Trask could never make that jump. And I had some hope that he would make strides, and then seeing some training camp film and stuff like that, it was evidence I don't know what the kid needs to do to make that next step, but I think that sometime in this year, it's going to be sink or swim, because the team's going to go the way we think it's going to go, and the coach is going to have to put him in, and we're going to be going, okay, let's see how it is.
You do see most of the successful quarterbacks in the NFL have success very early on, right? In their careers, it's not like they break out in year 8.
Yeah, I mean, there are some Tannehill was just horrible in Miami, and he's doing well. There are some people that just grow a little differently, but they've had a.
He's doing okay, but I would contend that when I say great, the Mahomes, right, the Jalen Hurts, these guys usually broke out very early,
or they were sitting behind somebody like Aaron Rodgers, sat because Brett Favre.
That's old NFL. That's not new NFL.
But here's the thing: whenever Aaron Rodgers went in, you went, darn, that kid can play.
Yep.
You weren't.
Yeah.
When Aaron Rodgers took over and
way four spread out, right? At some point, they had to realize what they had. And
so when he went in and started doing well, us seeing Green Bay a lot back in the day, I was never shocked that Aaron was as good as he was, because we saw him play and we knew what he could do, and it wasn't like when some of these people come out that shock people, like when Kurt Warner got a shot and he just blew everybody away because everybody was like, who the heck's Kurt Warner? It wasn't that to me. So I'm hoping this kid down here has that shot, because
I haven't given up on him.
And I like him. You hear his interviews. A second-round pick that comes to a team that's sitting behind the greatest quarterback of all time and another first-round pick. Nowadays, those kids are running their mouths saying that they're not getting time, they're not getting equality. And that kid, you haven't heard one thing except put his head down and go to work.
Yeah, no complaints about him as a teammate as far as I've heard.
Now, the other thing that scares me about them is the move of Tristan Wirfs from right tackle to left tackle. Now, those of you that know football but never played offensive line or don't know football, everybody goes, it's the same position, what's the big deal? My thing to you is wipe your backside with your non-dominant hand and tell me how easy that is. It's like expecting the quarterback to throw with his other hand. But you can't.
And that's Wirf's literal. He is known amongst the tackles for that right punch.
That cannon that he has, right?
And it protects the outside as the rusher's coming out. Right. And now he switches over to the left side. That don't work.
I saw him miss a couple times.
Yeah.
It's timing.
Yeah.
And your body's different. Your footwork's different. Things are happening.
Dribbling, throwing a baseball, doing all of these athletic activities with your offhand, it's not that easy.
And the closer you get to the ball, the easier it is to make that switch. Playing right guard, left guard, that's an easier transition because the variation is different. When you're out at the tackle, remember, these guys aren't lining up. I'm doing my football thing here. They're not lining up right on you. They're lining up out here. Or whereas the other guard, other tackle, they're out here. So your vision, your kick step, you're kick stepping with the other foot. Your perspective on the field is different. It's just, I hope the kid does well, but I don't know why in the heck you take the best right tackle in the league and go, hey, go play another position.
I know why. You don't have a left tackle.
I know that answer, Keith, but come on now.
Like I said, we're in a difficult spot this year, and we're going to have to start building back some of these pieces we've lost.
What are your views on the defense?
I think the defense of the Buccaneers always has the potential to be special. They have to play with passion and just a will to dominate. And when the attitude of the defense is there, they certainly have the talent on them. Yeah. I'm always optimistic that we have the ingredients we need on defense, but we've also seen years like last year where there's been some letdown on defense, and I think that's which defense shows up this year. I'm hopeful since I think they're going to need to pick the offense up. I'm hopeful we see a better defense this year.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about our first round draft pick. The kid's special, don't get me wrong. And I know that for me saying I think he's a little too undersized and all the rants that you heard from me about metrics and how size doesn't really matter. And I know he's the same size as Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald is a freak. That's like saying he's the same size as Muggsy Bogues, he should be able to dunk. But you can't do that. I have really high hopes, and especially if people don't respect him to begin with, and they still double Villa because they have to, because you can't block him one-on-one. Mm-hmm. I think Quentin Nelson is probably the only really guard that has a shot in the NFL of blocking him one-on-one, just from a sheer technique. And Quentin Nelson is probably not as strong, but has the best his technique, his strength.
Yes.
But number 50 is still running through. If you single team him, he's taking you to the quarterback,
right?
Taking you for a ride. Right. Hopefully, when they double team him or chip him, that lets that young buck do his thing, get some room in the interior to spin and move. Because if they clog him down, I don't know if he just has the weight in his back pocket to bull rush the grown-ass men in the NFL. He's going to have to use a little more technique, and you're going to need a little more space for that.
Yeah, he's going to have an adjustment period, I'm sure, but I'm hopeful that he develops into one of the better tackles over time.
Yeah, me too. We're going to Florida State. Put a smile on your face. How do you think we're going to do this year?
It's playoffs or bust. I have been saying it since last season. I really think we're making the playoffs this year. Mike Norvell, I've been so impressed with the job he's done and what he had to do to take over that team and start to move it in the right direction. A complete culture change has happened at Florida State. We've got Jordan Travis, who by all accounts has dramatically improved since last season, and you think of how well he did last season.
And he's like in his 19th year of eligibility, isn't he? It seems like Jordan's been playing for us for forever.
It does, but not in the sense that last year was the first time he got to be the man. Before he shared time with Mackenzie Milton.
And before Blackman, and
sat behind. This is like his second year of running the offense, and word is that he has improved dramatically.
My one question, and yes, guys, it always seems like I come back to the offensive line and defensive line because that's what I coached and that's what my son plays. I always watch that more than anything. But out of all the positions, I think this extension due to COVID, and those of you that don't know, if you were playing during COVID, college football, they gave you 2 extra years of eligibility. Even if your conference played during COVID, you got 2 extra years of eligibility. So a lot of these people, for example, a really good friend of ours in the firms, Dylan Gibbons, was a left tackle for Florida State. Dylan played
football. A great human being.
Great human. Played football for Clearwater Central Catholic.
Is a great human being.
His family lived right up the street. His mom is an attorney that her firm and Herman Wells are really good, have a good relationship, and we're friends with her. But he played 4 years at Notre Dame. And then 2 years at Florida State. So he played 6 years of high-level college football. But in that time, and there was another Florida State lineman that meant that the younger guys, who are now going to be juniors and seniors, or even seniors, haven't seen the field. And offensive line is a position that it's not like wide receiver. It's not like one of what they say the skilled positions. You just can't take somebody there, okay, 3 years sitting on the bench, go block the guy from Georgia. You can't do that. So that's my little fear, is that they had so many linemen that were in their 5th and 6th year that are now gone. The guys underneath them, we weren't really blowing people out like in the old days, so they didn't get a lot of playing time. So I think it's going to look a little rough in the beginning on the offensive line. I hope not. And especially when your first game is against LSU, you can't be rough on that offensive line. You need to be cool on that. Well, that's what I'm hoping.
I've got good news for you. I predict the best offensive line for Florida State since 2013.
Really?
No hyperbole. Absolutely, I do. A lot of the concerns that you had were addressed in the offseason. Mm-hmm. They brought in a left tackle, Byers, and he came in very highly rated from a smaller university.
Transfer.
Transferred over, but by all accounts has been tearing it up in camp. You've got Roddick, who was one of the transfers from Colorado, coming in as guard. You've got Keandre Jones, who came in from Auburn. And remember, we're getting back Bless Harris. Bless Harris started against LSU last year, held his own, but got injured in that game and went on to miss the whole season. He'll be coming back at tackle. He's fully healthy and by all accounts doing amazing in camp as well. So you have a line full of veterans.
Where's the depth on that?
We actually have, according to Coach Atkins, he says we've got 8 offensive linemen that can play at the highest of levels needed in college football, and they'll actually be starting the year rotating a lot of these guys.
And that's good, because that was a concern I had, and I haven't been as deep into Florida State football as I have in the past. Again, simply because I'm just more concerned about the school my son plays for right now. Okay. But that was my huge fear, was that, like it happened in Jameis's last year, besides all the interceptions he threw, we lost 2 offensive linemen, and we had no depth. Because Jimbo hadn't drafted a 5-star offensive lineman in 4 years. And every time Jameis lined up, yes, was he running for his life and throwing erratic throws? Yes. Because he had 4 or 5 different lines, rotations in front. You can't play like that. I'm glad to hear they have the depth. So who on the team? Now, we know Travis and all those people. Who's the name that nobody knows about right now that you think that everybody's going to know by the end of the year on the Florida State team?
I love this question. How many players can I give you? One comes to mind.
Just one.
Destin Hill. He'll be the one I go with. Destin Hill is a freshman, but he's not a usual freshman. He is, I believe, 20 years old. So he came out of high school during COVID, agreed to commit to Florida State, but had some personal matters, and nothing like that or anything like that. I think it was just family issues or something to do with that, and he had to take 2 years and delay his dream. Mm-hmm. This is his freshman season technically, but he is not playing as a freshman. By all accounts, he has a speed that hasn't been seen on this football team for a long time, and he's going to step in and hopefully get to play a lot of slot receiver. Mm-hmm. It's going to take some time, I think, but by the end of the season, I would say he's probably an electric player that a lot of folks know about that they did not know his name at this point.
Okay, so besides Florida State and besides the Blue Bloods, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, what teams do you think, even from the Group of 5, mid-MAC or whatever, what teams in that range do you think that, because I have a couple in mind that are going to really shock people this year, be one of those teams that they say, woo, if the playoffs was expanded, that team would go to the playoffs and cause a stir?
You give me yours and I'll think about my answer
Okay.
while you give me yours.
I have 3. One is Coastal Carolina.
Okay.
Coastal Carolina have always,
Chanticleers, right?
yeah, has always been there. Their coach is very impressive. At one time they were ranked last year and the year before they were in the top 25. I think they only lost 1 game last year, 1 or 2 games last year, 1 or 2 games the last year before. They are flipping this script on offensive and defensive lines. They're not going with these big, most of these places, Power 5, can't play center, can't play unless you're 6'5". Guards are 6'5", 6'6". You don't play tackle until you're 6'7", unless you're 6'7", which makes no sense because you watch the draft, there was 1 6'7" guard, 6'7" tackle taken. The rest of the tackles were 6'4", 6'5", normal people. The year before that, the first guard taken overall was 6'2". But these schools now, and trust me, for Alabama, it's worked for them. You can't say it, but those guys don't translate. A lot of those guys don't translate to the NFL. Carolina have gone with, they have guys out playing tackle for them that are 6'4". Their center last year was 5'9". Their center this year, a kid that played at CCC, 5'11" at center. But they're all technically good and strong as houses. I think that Toledo's going to really surprise people this year coming out of the MAC. I really do think that. And in the Big Ten, I think that Illinois is going to do some really good things. They got a great defense. If they can get some offense together, I think Illinois is going to shock some people up there.
And that kind of, I'll say Washington. I think Washington's going to be that this year's potentially TCU that has a chance to make an outside run at a playoff spot.
And so this goes back to, because we have to tie it all back to Florida State with Keith here, Colorado.
Yes.
Under Deion.
Deion.
How do you think they do?
Time. They are going to have an awful season when it comes to wins and losses. They'll probably be lucky to win 3 games this season.
How do you think Shador is going to do?
But I think, so I don't say that to badmouth Colorado. I'm not trying to rain on their parade. I know they're very happy with Deion, and I do think Deion has surprised me.
What he did at Jackson State was amazing.
Phenomenal. And he, when that first got started, you think media personality goes to become a coach. Is this going to work? Even though he knows football so good, you still wonder, is it going to work? Not only did he make it work, he thrived. I think he helps kids out tremendously. I think he's going to do the same in Colorado, and I think he will eventually get that ship righted. But there was so much house cleaning. I think they had the most turnover of
53 transfers out.
Unreal. So, yeah, unfortunately what Deion has learned very early on in his coaching career, or maybe he knew this before he started, is to get where you're going, you got to lose some of the dead weight, the kids that don't buy in, that will potentially be cancers on the team, or just they won't be swimming in the same direction. Right. And I think what he's done is he's had to clean house and get the players with the mindset he wants and he's looking for, and I think he'll eventually have success there.
And I think what he found out by coaching Jackson State first, which is an HBCU, is that a lot of these kids that got overlooked because they're an inch too short, or they came from a small school, or for whatever reason, you give them a chance, they're dogs, and they play. And because I saw Jackson State play 3 times live, and I saw Shador play twice live. The kid's the real deal. Yeah. Sanders, he's the. And people say, "Oh, they're playing in it's FBS ball and it's a SWAC." I'm like, those kids still go out there and play football, right? And he made them look silly some games. He was so good, big, strong, fast, 6'2", 215. He's a big kid, but he's fast as hell. I think he's gonna shock. I think Colorado. I agree with you. I think Colorado's gonna have a mediocre season. You said bad. I say mediocre.
I'd say bad.
But I think that his name is going to be bandied around at the end of the season for maybe not the Heisman, but some of the other quarterback trophies or things like that go around. Because was the O'Brien Trophy? Because I just think that he's special. Can he translate it to the next level? Is the thing. Now,
does he have the supporting cast around him that allows for him to showcase that talent?
That's true.
That's going to be the big concern. Is, does he have the offensive line bodies? Does he have the receivers? Does he have the running back to take the pressure off the passing game? These are the areas that I think are going to be lacking. And as a quarterback, there's only so much you can do. You do need to be able to have that point guard ability to have playmakers.
My only, as a Deion Sanders fan, and trust me, when he was at Jackson State, his rival was my son's school. So some of the stuff he was saying about my son's school got me mad, but I always laughed because he said it in the most Deion way, and they were funny. It's like when Steve Spurrier used to make fun of Florida State, used to piss me and you off, but in the back of our head, we're like, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's fun. I'm torn because I like Mike Norvell, and I think Mike Norvell is going to do good things. I just don't know if Deion is killing it at Colorado and Mike makes one little misstep. Is Deion coming back?
No.
You think he'd go to the NFL before he comes to Florida State?
And I'm not sure Deion would want to come back at this point. I think there may have already been some talks before Norvell was hired, potentially with Deion, and I suspect those didn't go well. He didn't get the job, or Florida State didn't feel like he was ready for the job at the time. And I worry that there has been a little bit of a rift created between Florida State and Deion. And I don't like to see that. But I don't think Deion's time, if we're projecting down the future, look, we come from the era of Bobby Bell. We want to see somebody have that tenure at Florida State,
of course,
that run at Florida State, right? So as a diehard Knoll, I want Mike Norvell to be the next Bobby Bowden, right? I want him to turn 50, 60 years old coaching at Florida State. That is what I want. I want stability. You look at the great NFL teams, right? They have the same head coach for a very, very long time. The Steelers, how many coaches have they had? Not very many.
2.5.
Yeah,
I think.
not very many. So you want that stability in football. And like when I talk, you have to understand I come from that bias, that perspective. Right. And so for that reason, and that reason alone, I don't want to see that happen because I want Norvell to see it.
Do you think that he has the coaching cachet and also the buy-in that he can go in 2 or 3 years and go into the NFL? This is Deion. Do you think he could be an NFL coach?
I don't know if he wants it. I think he likes to be a molder of young men, and I think he's extremely good at it. I think he's awesome at it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure that's what he wants. If he wanted it, could he coach in the NFL at some capacity eventually? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'd be easier for him to coach at the NFL. I think he'd find that job. This is just my guess, never being a coach myself, mm-hmm. right? But my guess is he would find the NFL job easier than what he's doing at Colorado right now. Think of how much more college coaches have to do. Not only are they just coaching X's and O's, but these kids aren't professionals. They're being molded into professionals.
And the problem that a lot of NFL coaches have is the egos and the money and the people think they deserve everything. The coaches that get around that are your Bill Belichick's and Tomlin's and Mike Rivera and those guys who turn around and go, I don't care how much you got paid, scoreboard. Look at what I've done. And Deion could walk in and say, I have everything. I have every ring except the
career board.
I have every ring except the national championship. Right. By the way,
right?
Does he have a Super Bowl ring with the World
Super
Series
Bowl?
ring?
Yes.
So he's got 2 Super Bowls at least, a World Series, the
30 for 30 on him.
30-30, the all-decade team, and a gold jacket. Who's going to tell him?
Right.
I don't care how much money you make. He's going to say, sit the you-know-what down, because this is the way it is. And he was the one that, you talk about media personalities and the brand. Fine, Joe Namath may have started that a little bit or whatever, but it really wasn't until Deion and Irving, those were the ones that really started that brand, selling themselves as the brand. Now, Michael Jordan didn't sell himself. Nike and McDonald's and Coke and all that sold Michael Jordan, because it's just not his personality to be out there. And Deion showing up at a limo to the combine in a suit and taking off his dress shoes and running the 40 and still being faster than everybody. Who does that?
Nobody. Just goes to show you like what an athlete the guy is.
But the only person, guys, and you can fast check this, the only person that Deion ever admitted caught him from behind, Bo Jackson. And it was when they were playing Oklahoma, and Deion was a freshman and caught an interception and was running down the sideline and was running and started looking around, started doing stuff, and he had no idea. And Bo Jackson, you can look at the video, comes up and palms the back of his helmet and tackles him by the helmet by grabbing the back of his helmet and pulling him down. Even though Deion is an amazing 2-sport athlete, Bo Jackson is the best 2-sport athlete, 3-sport athlete to ever play. Some people say Jim Brown because Jim Brown was the best lacrosse player to ever play also. But you got to give it to Bo Jackson. But when people are saying now that the kid from Arizona, that's the quarterback for Arizona, that had the baseball that had the big offer from the baseball and then went and played Aaron Murphy, something. Kyler Murray, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Back from the bar. Thank you very much. Tip you're a bartender, everybody. There you go. They were saying that he's the best 2-sport athlete to ever play, and I'm like, let's not even talk about that because you're not as good as Jim Brown and Bo Jackson. But there are two that came out of Florida State, three that came out of Florida State that are better.
It's
Charlie Ward, Jameis Winston. Everybody forget that Jameis Winston was an outfielder and a pitcher
Yeah.
for Florida State. And Dion. And actually, Charlie Ward was a three-sport athlete because he was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers, too, in baseball.
Chris Winkie
Chris Winkie, Florida State's racking him up.
played minor league ball.
Played
right?
minor league ball, right? And then won a national championship and played for the Panthers for a while. Anyways, guys, this is just us talking about football. We're going to do this periodically. Now we're going to put Keith on the spot and we're going to make him make some predictions. And then we're going to revisit him as the year goes on to see how he does. Picks for the two teams that are going to be in the Super Bowl.
See, I haven't thought about these before.
You know what?
Give me a second.
You need a second thing. The two teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl this year in the NFL. Who are your choices? San Francisco and Kansas City. From the back, no thought necessary.
And now Keith can't choose those teams either.
Yes. But he can choose one of them.
Let's say the Bills break through, right? So
Oh, Alan's going to love you on this one.
I'll say Bills break through. Gosh, I can't use 49ers, huh?
You can use 49ers.
I like the 49ers' chances out of the NFC.
Yeah. Bills, 49ers. All right. How about for the four teams going to the playoffs in the college football?
Florida State, of
Okay.
course. Ohio State.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, Florida State can't be all four, Keith.
Florida State, Ohio State, Georgia, and let's go Michigan.
So two Big Ten teams, huh?
Yeah,
Alabama's not sniffing it this year?
they could. They certainly could flop with Michigan. I could see that, but I really think Alabama's going to take a couple losses this season. I think Texas is going to get them. I also think LSU is probably going to take them down. Do you get a two-loss Alabama team? It depends on what Michigan does, but yeah, that's what I'll go with for right now.
You heard it first here, folks. Thank you very much for watching us today, listening if you're listening. Again, we are doing these informational podcasts. Please follow us, like us, the whole 9 yards. If you have any questions regarding your homeowner's policy, personal injury, disability, construction litigation, we do it all at Herman Wells. Give us a call, 727-821-3195. That's 727-821-3195, and we'll see you guys later. Have a safe day.